the declaration about the high seas came just days after our expedition. I was in Panama at the Ocean John Kerry event.
Oh yeah.
Next year it'll be in Greece. We don't have a date yet, sometime probably in March of next year. But Panama took the occasion as the host to announce their commitment to 54% of their exclusive economic zone for protection, which sort of throws down the gauntlet that others are aspiring to 30% by 2030. And here's Panama saying, hey, why wait and why stop at 30? So we need some real action. The troubling thing about the high seas framework is that I think a lot of the movement is, well, let's aim for 30% of the high seas, when actually we should say all of the high seas should be off limits to industrial fishing and deep sea mining, like, period. It keeps the door open for shipping and a few other things that are probably causing problems. But I mean, realistically, if you could just stop industrial fishing, which has no basis for any one nation going into the global commons and disproportionately taking large quantities of life, it just doesn't make any sense, or the deep sea mining either. So, but it's a start. The framework is in place now for nations to sign on to a mechanism to be able, for the first time in the high seas, to establish protected areas. I just think we should do all of it.
And how many nations now do you have?
But, well, if you take those that are there's a coalition of about 50 nations that call themselves the High Ambition Coalition, that we're moving toward bringing this framework into place. But I think at this point, none have actually signed. It's just big celebration. We've got the mechanism so that nations can sign. And the hope is that they'll do it speedily, not take years, because it will take a minimum number, and I'm not sure what that number is. It was something like 90 required for the law of the sea.
What's the essence of it? I haven't actually read the agreement yet, Sylvia. I need to do that. But the essence of it is what?
To establish a mechanism so high seas protected areas can legally be established. Right now, there's no mechanism for that. It's wide open. It's the wild west.
Mechanism to create a protected area in the high seas.
Correct.
I see. So it's not a commitment to create. It's not a commitment by countries to create a certain percentage at this point.
No.
It's a commitment to create the mechanism by which that can be legally enforceable.
Correct. So the next step is identifying. The next step is for ratification by a critical number of nations, so that instead of it just being an empty framework, it means that it's legally endorsed. And then comes the identification of places within the high seas that would have full protection.
Right.
I think the general thought is that it should be at least 30% of the high seas.
And the high seas are defined as areas in the sea beyond the, what do you call them? The economic zones.
Correct.
200-mile limit, I think.
That is correct. And that means about half of the world. So if you could at least stop the most destructive activities, currently industrial fishing, that about 5 nations are disproportionately taking many millions of tons of wildlife out of global commons. And that includes the waters around Antarctica, where krill fishing and
Yeah.
fishing for deep sea, these ice fish, the Chilean sea bass, is just wrecking.
It's a crime, isn't it?
It should be a criminal, which now there's at least a mechanism in motion. But meanwhile, those factory ships, the mega krill killers, if you will.
Yeah. Krill killers. Yep.
Just a story in the past few days about Chinese krill, these mega ships going right through a feeding area with the whales.
Yeah, the whales. They're stealing their food.
Correct.
You know, before we got on this call, I spoke with Laura Turner, who was with you, of course, down there, and she mentioned that the Chinese factory ships are taking the krill.
Yeah,
that are the primary, basis of the food chain.
But what are we using krill for? Like, you don't go to the shop and eat krill.
Two things. One is krill oil that is being sold like the omega-3 health stuff. It's nonsense. I mean, you can get, if you want omega-3s, you can certainly get it from sources that don't mean killing krill and destabilizing. The krill do not manufacture the oils, they get it from what they eat. And there's several companies, and I had really endorsed the concept of land-based controlled cultivation of the phytoplankton and taking the oils from the direct source, not from fish or krill or squid that are the you don't have to squeeze the oil out of fish or krill or squid. You can grow directly from the source. Anyway, the other even more egregious, I think, is killing the krill, bagging it up and sending it to salmon farms in Norway, in Chile, in New Zealand, and in Seattle.
I see.
So it's mostly salmon farming, and Norway's krill fishing in Antarctica is directly related to their salmon farming.
I see. Wow. Geez, we create some crazy systems, don't we?
There's this article in Science, I think it's Science, maybe it's Nature, just this past week, about the aquaculture of salmon, land-based. They don't even mention the food. They mention the billions of dollars, big B, billions invested in land-based aquaculture of salmon. First of all, a stupid animal to choose for large-scale farming because they're carnivores. It's like, we're going to raise tigers now to feed a lot of people.
Right.
So they are taking krill from Antarctica with a big carbon footprint to just in terms of getting the ships from Northern Europe or China to all the way to Antarctica, and then a bigger carbon footprint because they're taking carbon out in terms of krill, and they're disrupting the nutrient cycles that drive the phytoplankton that captures the carbon and provides the food for all of the kind of the base of the Antarctic system. So it's a lose-lose no matter how you look at it.
Laura also mentioned that the sea ice, due to the 4-degree temperature rise, I guess, in the oceans, is so low, and the krill need the sea ice. Is that right?
It's part of it's all connected. The system is biologically driven. It's connected, all of it. Carbon, follow the carbon. And you see that the warming is related to the carbon cycle. It is related to the fact that the world is alive. It's not just a physical process, it's a biological process.
The living sea.
Well, it does give us hope, doesn't it? I mean, I think having as you said, the framework in place now, I guess the attention now turns to putting it into action and getting agreement on the areas to be protected. But how do we go about that, Sylvia? What's the process by which the world goes about what is it, an identification of the regions that are most important to start, preserving?
Yeah, I think that work is already in progress in terms of scientific input. The most critical areas, corridors that are known to exist for wildlife, like where the whales and turtles and seals and sharks. I think it's the basis for why some nations are already coming together, like off the eastern tropical Pacific, where these wildlife corridors that are mostly in their country's exclusive economic zones, but extend into the high seas. There's a coalition of countries around that have come together independently, I mean, prior to this announcement, for the Sargasso Sea, recognizing that vast, I call it floating golden rainforest of sargassum, has an important carbon capturing mechanism that relates to climate. So I think about a dozen nations have already come together with a pledge, even though it has no official weight. So examples like, and of course, the waters around Antarctica are perfect for saying we've got a mechanism now to just protect in the high seas, and the waters around Antarctica are global commons. Why are we taking krill? As any nation doing that should be off limits.
Yeah, this is fascinating. This is really fascinating. Okay, we need to think about how we can all, elevate and accelerate the actual protection. The implication, though, is a protected. Once we agree on a protected zone, does that automatically mean there's no economic activity in there?
Well, it depends on how you define economic activity.
I should say extractive activity. For example, like
that would be
deep sea trawling and
that would definitely be the goal, because it's looking at, if you will, with respect to climate, a nature-based solution or part of how do you safeguard the habitability of the planet by maintaining the natural systems intact instead of it's like clear cutting a forest. You keep the forest intact and get a carbon credit for it.
Yeah.
In the high seas, you keep the system intact. Everybody gets the carbon credit, if you will. There is an economic link if you want to put a carbon value on whales or krill or sharks. And I think the International Monetary Fund has been, in a way, trying to do that, assign a dollar value to the living whales versus dead whales, the carbon value. And even though no individual country or company is enjoying that credit, if you will, the dollar credit, all of us should recognize that there is economic benefit in terms of holding the planet steady.
Yeah. Sylvia, that reminds me of something else. We are members of our research team are coming up with a very significant report on oceans just in time for Oceans Day. And so what's that sort of beginning of June, isn't it? I forget now. 8th of June, isn't it?
The 8th of June.
That's Thursday, so it'll start that Monday. Yeah.
Yeah. And I forget whether you did meet her, but of course you were on the screen on Zoom. But she was on the panel that we hosted at COP27. Dr. Ying Chin, who wrote that previous report. She's now writing a bigger report on oceans and really highlighting aspects around the importance to business and finance to be protecting the oceans rather than this extractive process we have at the moment. Question for you is, would you consider, if we invited you to write an introduction, a prelude, a preface to the report, would that be something you can consider doing? And again, I would obviously show you the report and the structure to make sure it's something that you agree with. But would that be something that you would at least consider?
Be pleased to look at it and hope that I can make a contribution. Sure.
Okay. Well, let me come back to you on that once I've got an outline from Ying, and I
Yep.
can send it through, and then you can consider it. If it doesn't hit the right buttons for you, obviously you can decline. But hopefully it does hit all the right buttons, and therefore to be able to help give it the framing that you would like to provide for it, I think would be fantastic. But I'll come back to you on that.
I think it's critical, Keith, that we make the connection between a healthy natural system and a healthy economy.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't have an economy unless the world is
Yeah.
working properly.
No.
Keith, what's the object of the report? To go to your city clients and then?
Yeah, look at these reports. These are called GPS reports. They're publicly available. You can actually just Google Citi GPS, and they all come up. And there's reports, so it's publicly available. It's effectively a public service to everyone to learn about particular topics that are relevant to the world. Big issues. It helps to set the framing for companies and banks and investors to be more aware of these issues and think through how they can be contributing to solutions.
Like investing in these land-based salmon farms should be a big no. I mean, they will crash eventually. Why not sooner rather than later?
Mm.
They're based on a false premise. There is no free lunch, truly. Taking wild krill or any wild fish, now gearing up, and again, we're talking big B billions, to take the deep scattering layer, that migratory mass of life in the high seas and even in coastal waters over deep water systems, to just use again for fish meal or for animal food like pigs and chickens and cows. It's just industrial taking of wildlife, like grinding songbirds to feed to pigs. Like, why would we do this? There are limits. You can look everywhere. When there was a big boom, and again, lots of money invested in gathering up guano, fish poop, if you will. I mean, bird poop. And they just mined it until it was gone. And then they had to look elsewhere for sources of phosphates that are the principal component of the first fertilizer, nitrates and phosphates. It crashed. Taking krill will crash too. Taking any wildlife has limits. And with the new technologies to take on a scale that is now possible, it's not going to take like centuries. It'll take decades. I mean, less than the lifetime of the people who are around. Already we're seeing the consequences of the krill fishing in terms of starving penguins that have enough trouble already with the warming, and now not even being able to get enough krill to feed themselves and their chicks. It's just their populations are sliding quickly. And I mean, it's obvious when you look at it, but when you only look at, okay, free krill, free food for our aquaculture or to feed to animals on the land, chickens and other farmed animals. It's short-term gain, but everybody pays.
Mm.
And it ultimately
Yeah.
will crash. This is just stripping the last stable sources of wild populations of anything. This was actually identified 20 years ago, maybe a little more. Conference in Portugal that I attended where they're looking at the last wild sources of protein, squid, krill, and the deep scattering layer. It's now that there's a technology and marketplace that justifies these billion-dollar investments to go and strip away the last wild sources of anything, something that can be marketed. Deep sea mining, of course, is the other monster on the horizon that proposes, if it goes forward in the scale that the metals company and others are hoping to achieve, to destabilize the systems that make everything possible, life itself. But that includes all the businesses of the world. You know, you can't function if you can't have a climate that's favorable.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, Sylvia, I think we ought to be, off the back of the High Seas Treaty, we should be brainstorming just what how we at Citi can and other collaborators, can do to really accelerate the actual implementation of it now. Whether it's Citi, whether it's Villar Institute, whether it's AREDAY, a whole bunch of other collaborators, Explorers Club, etc. Because it seems to me now we've got the legal framework, we need to make it work.
So maybe it's framed in terms of the economic benefits of protecting the high seas. I mean, if you believe in sustainable extraction of anything, you can't take it all. I mean, a bank account, the principle, you want to keep the great majority of it intact, so you can take some on a continuous basis. You start getting greedy, the classic example of the kid who inherits a big bundle and then enjoys spending it right down to the last nickel. Live it up, and then you die.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah. Okay, so that's a top priority. I think the next topic, Sylvia, by the way, Johan sent me a message. He because of the time difference issue, Chip, he's not able to join us. There was because of the mix-up, so he's unable to join us. I'm sorry. As I said, he's in Villar now. He's at the hotel. But so second key thing, Sylvia, is whether we can possibly secure you for Lofoten Islands on the yacht for diving, and potentially using that as a platform for. This is not the high seas because it'll be in Lofoten, is within the economic zone of Norway, but how we could use that as a platform, as a microphone and loudspeaker, but also having a lot of fun and with some great change makers there with us. So that's the question. Do you think?
I like the fun part. Let's.
Yeah. So I was just on the yacht, by the way. We were up at Johan and I had a week or 4 days skiing up between Oslo and Bergen with a group of about 18, 19 climate scientists. So we're out in the wilderness, ski touring during the day. It was just amazing. It's called the Tafala Think Tank, and it was a combination of adventure and thinking. So we go ski touring between 8:30 till about 3:30 each day, 3:30, 4 o'clock. and then we get together at 5 o'clock through till about 11 o'clock. We just are there debating, discussing, presenting, solutions. Johan gave a great presentation on his latest science around what the world looks like at 2 degrees, which is pretty scary.
Yeah.
We had a great presentation from another scientist about the status of the world's glaciers. Another one actually would really interest you, from a woman who's driving the so-called law for nature, and that's using legal frameworks to, the previous term was prevent ecocide, but they're trying to be a bit more positive, so they changed that language to the law of nature. And really is trying to use the global framework, effectively like the legal frameworks we have for global crimes,
Right.
and to operations. So that's a really fascinating trend. Well, no, not a trend. It's a fascinating progress that's being made to try to get this law of nature into operation globally.
It's like the movement some time ago. Do trees have standing, to give them,
Yeah.
if you will?
Get them standing, yes.
And the
It's a
rivers.
pretty interesting one. And we had a number of other presentations as well. And then we went to Bergen, so to spend 2 nights on the yacht, which was great fun. It was very cold there, by the way. It was dumping snow, so we had a good sort of, I don't know, 10 centimeters of snow on the yacht. So so that's where we are. So as you know, we're definitely going on those trips in July and August. I think.
What are the dates that are most?
Well, I'll let you know that the dates that are in order of preference, but I think you'd indicated that late August would not be good for you. But between Johan and myself,
Right, I'm getting something to write up with here.
Number one preference is the 21st of August to the 27th of August.
Okay.
Number two preference,
yep,
is 12th of August to the 18th of August.
Okay.
And number three preference is the 3rd of August to the 9th of August.
Okay.
And then I think from memory you had indicated that, was that right? July. I think for Johan, July he's not able to do July. That's right. Yeah. So it's those three dates that would would work for all of us. Would work for me and for Johan.
So it's 3 through 9, 12 through 18, 21 through 27.
Yeah.
In reverse order.
In reverse order. That's correct. But we can do any of those. So if you had a preference, we would make it work.
I will get back to you very shortly with my 1, 2, 3.
Okay, wonderful. And look, I think we can co-create something really special, right? I think we've got a. By the way, one of the participants on the trip this week is from Lofoten. She lives there. She's an amazing leader around sustainability with a focus on oceans. So she's a great partner for us on the ground. She's also giving us advice about the diving at Lofoten. So she's on top of it. So I think if you can do it and you give us the preferred dates, what we can then do is we can co-create what the program would be. Right. And it would be, I mean, Johan, well, I'm super excited. I know Johan is also super excited about the opportunity. So, and Chip, just remind me your own program. I think you indicated something about AREI-AREDAY, but is that flexible?
Yeah. So I'm waiting for this to do that. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So I'm waiting for this to drop in, but I'm asking you guys in terms of AREDAY. I mean, I'm thinking about doing something that's keying off on Tom Steyer, assuming that he'll join us at his room in his name at the RMI, and it's only going to be for 100 people. But would it work for you guys if we did the sailing diving expedition and then at the end of August to come to Aspen? I'm just wondering, is that too much to throw into the mix? Because then we could have a download, a high-level download of what happened there that would be filmed and so forth. And I can design build it. So I'm thinking about a 2-day event outside of Aspen in Basalt, where the Rocky Mountain Institute has its venue, which doesn't have a furnace, by the way. Amory's very happy to tell us all about how there's no air conditioning and no heating, and it works just fine and all that.
It's a great center. Yeah.
You know, at 7,000 feet up there. So the point is that it would be great to do that. And I'm thinking it would be great to do that after this happens. So if it were the first preference, as an example, 21 to 27, does it make sense that we would then lay in an AREDAY summit like the following week? Could we make that happen? Could everybody get over there? I know it's a big push in time and commitment. In order to have it also happen before Green Week in New York City, right? Because I sequence these things out in my mind in terms of, you know, magnitude and trying to get as big a bang for the buck, so to speak. At any rate, so, but I mean, so let's say, well, let's just, that's my thinking now. So I'm waiting to see where it is, Sylvia, for your schedule, Keith, for your schedule, and then we can talk about if it's even possible, you know, which it may not be. I understand that, but
well, why don't we, I think it's a great idea, by the way, Chip. So why don't we wait for Sylvia to check her diary to see what she can do. I'll also check in with Johan. Another thought would be to host something like that just before Climate Week, right? So that New York Climate Week, so that from a travel perspective, you know, Johan would be going to, I think, so they're able to then be more efficient with the travel.
Right. That makes sense. You know, should pop out to Colorado right before. Okay, well, we can try to do that too. You know, the only thing about August for me is that that's when Congress is on recess. So to get the senators and the congressmen to come, it's always better when they're not in session. But that, you know, we're so dysfunctional politically over here. Maybe there shouldn't be so much emphasis anymore on these people. I don't know, you know. Anyway, but we also need to get the legislation. You get the whole strategy here. So, but let's, Sylvia, if you could just, you know, look closely at your diary.
I have to resolve one thing at the end of August. The IUCN Patrons is proposing a trip that overlaps with this. It would be in Raja Ampat. So that may not come together. As soon as I determine that for sure, I will. But that's just the end. The first part of August is flexible. It's open. So.
Yeah.
And you're flexible, Keith? I mean, you're happy if it's, you know, the middle of August or even the beginning, according to Sylvia's schedule?
Yeah. First priority is toward the end of August. So I'll try to.
I'm just asking, you know, in terms of these priorities, I wasn't quite sure, you know, the thinking and all that. But I mean,
do you mean flexible for what? For our,
yeah, I mean, like if Sylvia said to you, oh, well, I can only do it from the 3rd to the 9th. I mean, that doesn't mess you up too badly?
No. As I said, we've provided those dates because that's what both Johan and I can do.
I see.
Right, but we just give you the order of preference.
Yeah.
But we'll do what you can do, Sylvia, between those 3 choices.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So
last thing I wanted to mention is that I think it would be, I would love to film this. I know I keep telling you this over and over, but if there's a way. I actually talked to Louis Cejoyos last week and I said, Louis, what if it was just you and me with our iPhones, you know, in there with these people? You know, does that work for you? Can we make a movie like that? Because the iPhones now are very technically advanced, you know, for film, believe it or not. And it's a small quarters, you know, so it's not like you want to have a film crew crawling around all over the place, you know. Yeah. But the conversations are going to be stunning. I know this. It'll be totally leading edge, particularly, you know, with Sylvia, but then you, Keith, bringing your, you know, global financial perspective in, and then Johan. I mean, it's really going to be quite something. So anyway, just let's be thinking about one person that is really expert at this particular job description that could actually, you know, and I can be the second camera. I know how to do that. Not that I want to, but I know how to. And
it's a good perspective, yeah. But I from my perspective, yes, I think it'd be great to be filming the conversations, the program. I think we can put something together, something very, very special together.
Okay, great. As
So
long
let's
as you're open to
hold,
that possibility.
yeah. So let's hold the thought until Sylvia can come back. We've got our, just so you know, we've put on hold any of the marketing around the whole summer because this is our top priority. If we can get the right date for this with the right, one of those dates, then we can frame the other parts around it. But so we're super excited about doing this with you. And Johan, he's moved things to allow these 3 dates to work. So
I won't dilly-dally. I'll get back to you forthwith.
thank you.
Excellent. All
Also,
right, I'm gonna go ahead.
I'm going to be speaking in Bergen on the 20th of April. There is a big ocean hoo-ha taking place that is ocean industry science. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know whether that's relevant to this or not, but again, Norway is a key player in the climate ocean space.
Yeah.
They are the ones who are driving the big ships, well, and several Asian nations, especially China, to capitalize on this deep scattering layer and krill in the Southern Ocean. So, and also deep sea mining, not in the waters, but in the high seas. So it's really an important audience. They have the wealth, they have the focus on the ocean, and not necessarily on the side of the angels.
No, you're right. And I think I have to say, Sylvia, from all the conversations I've been having recent months, there's actually becoming more pressure on systems to be looking at the ocean, meaning offshore wind production, for example.
Correct.
There's a lot of pressure to, for communities, for people who don't want to have, surrounded by windmills, wind farms in their own home, which is understandable, right? And same with even just natural beauty that we walk into, national parks, etc. So what I'm seeing is there's increasing pressure for there to be offshore wind farms. And that can be like, for example, if you go to the North Sea, it's, and you sail through there, you see vast arrays of the wind farms. Now, they're very good, but the key thing is that they're not damaging the environment, right? So you get this balancing act to occur. And
there are two big things with wind farms offshore. One is under the surface, it's not good.
Yeah.
Oceaneering was celebrating a major contract they got a couple of years ago to clear the sea floor by bulldozing away whatever boulders or whatever obstructions for the cables that would bring power back to the land. It takes like a super highway that's leveled so that the cables are unobstructed in bringing the power from the wind back to where it's being applied on land. So that's number one big issue, really destructive cable laying.
Yeah.
The second, well, whatever noise is associated with all of that operation, but the blades themselves with respect to birds, and when the blades are past their useful lifetime, become a major landfill.
They do.
So thinking it through, you have to cost benefit. Is the benefit worth the cost? And I don't have an answer exactly because we don't account for the cost to nature. I mean, it's just not there. We need to be, I mean, you come up against this, you must come against this all the time. Nature is regarded as free goods.
That's right.
And the individual investors are not paying the cost that all of us do, basically with every breath we take.
Agree. So that's one. And the second one is I just had a meet this morning with a seaweed company. Right, and I'm interested in your views on seaweed, because this could become a very, yeah.
Yep, that has a lot of pluses and minuses too. I've just been trying to wrap my mind around these proposals. Now, seaweed farming in a quasi-successful way has been done in China for decades. I visited a seaweed farm in Qingdao in 1980, and it had been underway for, I don't know how long, decades anyway, already by 1980. And one of my heroes, a Chinese seaweed master, was very much involved in taking a Japanese form of kelp and raising it in Bohai Bay and essentially cleaning up the bay with seaweed. That is, they were able to absorb much of the nitrate, phosphate runoff from the land, and it was healthier with the sea farms, the kelp farms there than before. But always trade-offs. Monocultures, whether it's cows or corn or kelp, or salmon, you create an environment that is vulnerable to pests that and diseases, the whole range of issues that you have when you get one species occupying a large area. Think about people. The monoculture we've created in cities. Anyway, you have to really be mindful of the trade-offs.
Yes, agree. And that's what worries me, is we humans not good at, we spot something else we think's a solution, and then we overscale it. Right. We overdo it.
And we have the capacity now to scale up so fast, and the market can be created so fast that
right,
you may make these blunders almost unwittingly because it seems like a good idea at the time, but then create problems on a scale that take not just a short-term fix. You can create problems faster than you can create solutions, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that just came up, and this is so you know that Dubai, which is Abu Dhabi, UAE, is hosting the COP coming up in December, and you know that Sultan Al Jaber, who's the head of ADNOC, is also the president of the COP. So he runs one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And so that's very controversial in the environmental community. However, having met this fellow and knowing his commitment from King Zayed, who passed away in '99, I think, but the vision for Abu Dhabi was the transition, the global transition. And this is the guy who also was leading the Masdar city. You remember Masdar, the green city that they've been building in Abu Dhabi with those goals and intentions?
That's green with quotes.
Well, okay, so maybe it's greenwashing, but I have been there. They're making an effort. Is a point. Okay, so like looking at what's positive, cup half full. And so today I just realized somebody just sent me that they're doing a IPO. Maybe you're aware of this, Keith. Apparently, it's the biggest one in the world right now on ADNOC. But I also know that ADNOC has been. There's some units, some divisions of renewable energy over there that has been very progressive in putting solar on islands in the Pacific, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, I just wanted to, get a temperature read from you, Keith, particularly, since you're at Citi, and then Sylia, like how's the best way to sort of, as we're all probably going to be in Dubai at Al Wasl, apparently an incredible venue, that they built out for the World Expo for a couple of years. But
Yeah, it's good. It's a good venue. Yeah.
yeah. So how should we like approach this for the positive result that we all desire, you know, in a collaborative fashion? VLAR Institute, Mission Blue, you know, AREI, et cetera, all of our other, you know, colleagues. I just think that there's some interesting things that might be possible if we're
Well,
creatively thinking.
one of the things that I think should be cause for hope is that this is the first time we've been able to look at the whole picture. This is where Johan really shines. He's trying to figure out what is it that keeps Earth habitable? What are the threats? What kinds of actions are we taking now that are destabilizing Earth as a place that is suitable for humans to survive? And the one thing that I keep pounding on Johan about is the living ocean, that he's really good. I mean, he's the expert on quantifying the physical rep. And it's just important to recognize that we have a planet that took 4.5 billion years, a lot of ups and downs, but we've got a planet that has been working in our favor. And Johan points out the last 10,000 years, the Holocene has been really cool for humans. And it's taking us 4.5 centuries, or maybe even 4.5 decades, to unravel, significantly destabilizing the very natural systems that make Earth habitable. And we did first a really good job on the land of destabilizing things in terms of the extinction of many of the large creatures and many of the birds. It took us 10,000 years to really make a big bite out of the land and all the terrestrial systems. We're still doing it. But the ocean has not been on the chopping block seriously until the middle of the 20th century, when technology got to the point where we could
do it
with oil. And I mean, we had coal, but then oil really amped up our ability to go anywhere in the ocean, and now go into the ocean on a scale that is unprecedented. It's the ocean that's held the planet steady, but now we're disrupting the ocean on a scale that took us 10,000 years to do it on the land. We're doing it in decades in the ocean. I mean, you look at the consumption, taking sharks from where they were down to where they are today in a few decades, 10% left. I mean, tunas, same trajectory. I felt like I made a fool of myself in a way when I was chief scientist at NOAA by saying, what are we trying to do? Exterminate tuna? Because I just got this message that from 1970 to 1990 in the Atlantic, 90% of the tuna had been extracted. We only had 10% left. That was based on the fishing records. And I said, hey, if we go take 90% in 20 years, how long before we take them all? And I was just like the little kid saying the emperor has no clothes on. Nobody wanted to hear that. Everybody wants to hear, well, we can take them sustainably if we just, leave enough so they can keep going. So in response to your question about this upcoming conference, I think the capacity to look at how the world functions, we still have a lot to learn, but we know enough to see that what we're doing isn't working, that we have to stabilize, as Johan keeps pounding away, we have to stabilize these precarious tipping point themes. But what needs to be a much bigger piece of that global view that Johan has developed is nature, is the natural intact systems, land, old growth forests, the ocean. We need to look at what's working. What are the places that are still in good shape and keep them that way? Don't let the disruption of the deep sea floor take place. Keep the carbon in the ocean. Don't mine the living systems that capture the carbon. I mean, we can get away. We have to live. We have to eat. With 8 billion people, but perhaps the message that what we were able to do when there were only 1 billion people, or 500 million 500 years ago, billion 19 in the in 1800, 4 billion by 1980, and now we're at 8 billion. Look, just look. Common sense says you can't continue to consume the natural world on the scale that we are now doing and still have a functioning planet. Period. So what should we do? Flat out, look in your backyard, look in your city, your country, the whole high seas, the global commons. It's not how much can we take, it's how little can we take and still keep a robust economy. And where can we extract the goods that we need? Can we look at places where we've, like, I mean, recycling is an overused word, but we can mine what we've already mined. We can think, what does it really take to feed 8 going on 10 billion people? We cannot do it with carnivores like salmon. We cannot do it with wildlife like songbirds or tuna, or we just can't. You just cannot do it. You want to make the math work, but the truth is the truth is the truth. It just doesn't compute. You do it by looking at making plants delicious, by making the waste go away. We should reduce the 40% or so of food waste and make sure that it doesn't get wasted, to streamline and make this a really good business. Streamline the food production and distribution, and enlist the chefs so that, you know, we take a handful of ingredients, flour, some kind of fat and salt, and make, you know, potato chips or popcorn, or, you know, just simple ingredients. But we market that. This is not nutrition. We need to get better marketers around good food, and instead of junk food and waste. We ought to figure it out somehow. I think the great edge that we've got now is the magnitude of being able to connect the dots and see how it all works together, and make investments, strategic investments that are real and that can help solve the habitability of Earth. You should be able to make big fortunes based on the reality rather than the illusion that.
Right.
Yeah. Very well said, Sylia. That's the task, isn't it? That's the challenge.
I mean, if we do it now, Keith, we've never known as much as we now know, and we'll never have a chance as good as what we now have. If we can just I think there was once a really great ambitious project to build a dam across the mouth of San Francisco Bay. Seemed like such a good idea at the time, but it wasn't done. There ultimately it was decided that would be a bad idea, but it could have happened. Think of the big ideas that are currently in motion that somebody could make them happen there, but maybe we shouldn't let it go forward. Can we get some cool heads to say, seems like a good idea, but have you really thought it through? In the context, the highest priority has to be to maintain a habitable planet. We certainly know how to make it worse. We need to make it better.
Well, I can see some fantastic discussions to be held in the phones, Sylvia, you and Johan and others. I think this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for us to be debating and focusing on these solutions. I mean, it does require a certain degree of government policy, corporate action, investor action, but also behavioural change, doesn't it? You know, it does require humans to actually change our behaviours. And that's sort of hard to do when you've been brought up a certain way, but it can be done. You know, we've got a whole ream of a whole generation of young people who now recognise
the film Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
That was, you know, my pitch is don't look down. I mean, it's the counterpart. Do look down.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Look down.
Well, on that note, I'm heading to Atlanta on Friday to meet Shie for her. She's receiving the Captain Planet Award from Ted Turner's family, Laura Rutherford, John R. Seidel. So it's a real big honor for her, obviously, and she is our, leading 20-year-old spokeswoman for these issues and her own inimitable dynamic voice that's been and you've both helped so much to help her get her out there. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I'll be bringing this conversation into that room, really looking forward to what's possible coming out of all of these plans. There's more to be said. As I mentioned to you, Keith, earlier, we're working on a climate special with CNN with the projections, with Louis and his team. September the 9th is the date that we're looking at. The Secretary General Guterres should greenlight that this week, we hope. So we're putting that together. We'd want you both to be involved in those projections, of course, just like in Glasgow, but taking it forward with, anyway, we won't spend a lot of time on that, but
funding is needed to make that happen, right, Chip?
Oh yeah, big corporate funding. I mean, I think we've got maybe, depending on how you look at it, maybe we've raised 4 of the 10 million. And part of that, though, the value proposition is that CNN, has blocks of ads that, big corporate would then take advantage of, branding on this special that'll go around the world globally. It's like a 2.5-hour special. But so that could happen potentially. Maybe folks like, sales, Mark Benioff, Salesforce would be a likely candidate. Others, maybe, I don't know if your company Citi is, a good candidate, but that this would then hopefully carry over to the COP 28 in Dubai. And that's how the team is looking at it at this point. We don't give up.
Very powerful to be able to engage so many people who otherwise wouldn't sit in a theater, but
and remember the
difference.
Great money goes. Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
No, I just think it's a great project. It's a great eye opener for people.
The money goes towards the development. Why we need so much more money is to get your voices out there, Sylvia. so that we're not just looking at your image, right, and what your quote is on the side of the building, but rather people are, watching their iPhones and looking and hearing what you're saying in real time around the world, so that if we project in Manhattan, it's not just folks in Manhattan that are seeing it live, but rather, we've marketed it ahead of time, to the world to get the message out there. And so, we learned that by projecting onto these iconic structures, the United Nations in 2014, both the Empire State Building and the Vatican in 2015, we in aggregate, we got something in the magnitude of 5.4 billion media impressions. These are big numbers. And so to think that we could do that again, albeit it has been, 8 years, I guess, since we did it. At any rate, that's the biggest thing that I'm involved with. But it's something I believe has to happen in order to, get mass consciousness up to speed on what you're saying, Sylvia, just now. And so anyway, listen, I've recorded this whole session. I'm going to give it to you both. Some brilliant was spoken here today. I'd like to take the time to
Actually,
review it.
before we go, let's get a photograph as well. Okay. Well, I always struggle to do this without sort of getting too close. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
One more. Hang on. That's good. That's good, Sylvia. Okay, I think that one worked very well. Thank you. That's great. I'll match that with the video or the recording. Chip?
Yeah, and this can be edited. Some stuff doesn't go out, but some stuff could go out, depending. So I'll let you, have at it with this. And I just think that we need to, again, get this information that we're discussing out there to the right places. Look, this guy Sultan Al-Jabbar, he's a good man. I could.
Yeah, I hear I've never met him, but I hear very good things about him. I know it's controversial to have him, from a position perspective, but from all accounts, he's a brilliant person.
Yes.
And he does his interests in the right.
Yes. And what's interesting about this guy? He chooses very, very bright women to put in positions of power around him. I've noticed that, his and so if you look at the COP lineup, it's he, and then I think there's 3 women that are handling everything on the second tier or what have you. And so I just think that there's a real opportunity here to, really accelerate all of our mutual goals.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually think that getting the economic powerhouses aligned in thinking that business decisions should be within the framework of, is this helping or harming the habitability of the planet? Because if we don't really get in alignment, more important than governments have to officially sign off and make the laws and so on, but the power is actually with those who have the money, period. It just is. So if it can be seen to be a really good investment to maintain Earth as a habitable planet, think about, is my enterprise helping or harming the habitability of the planet? It's sort of a first question. If I'm doing something that is causing the decline of Earth as a habitable planet, that maybe I ought to rethink my premise. If I'm doing something that's helping and really thinking it through, then come on board, because this is really a viable enterprise, whatever it is.
Well, maybe we need to create a new habitability index.
Well, for sure, killing krill in Antarctica is taking us down.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you saw that article I sent through to you from WWF on the krill.
No, what was
Oh,
that?
there was an article that I sent through just 2 days ago about the krill
I
fishing.
did see that. Yes, yes.
Go back and look at that.
Where the mega
Yeah.
trawler is going right through.
Exactly, the mega trawlers. Yep.
You know, Keith, I want to mention, Sylvia and I were discussing when she 10 years ago took a group to Galapagos, something was ignited there that produced a lot of a flourish of activity and a lot of money, actually.
Mhm.
Right, Sylvia? I mean, you came away. I mean,
16 million was committed. It didn't come to Mission Blue. It went to various projects that were dreamed up on that. Well, some people had thought about it before, but they came together, articulated goals that people on board actually got out their checkbooks and wrote the commitments. 2 million went to Wild Aid, for example, to have enforcement for the lawlessness of the fishing in the Galapagos Islands. Another 2 million was committed to begin the high seas effort of the Sargasso Sea. And that has resulted in this coalition with the Hamilton Declaration. The first 7 countries came together. Now it's more like a dozen countries. It's a continuing process that has gained some momentum, and so on through but overall, but it was pretty exciting. So it was commitments that were backed up with some financial substance. I mean, 16 million in the greater scheme of things is nickels and dimes when we're talking billions invested in destructive activity. It'd be great if we could figure out, okay, if I had $1 billion, how could I use it productively instead of destructively?
well, maybe that's what we could focus on this proposed Aspen meeting and put the right people in the room there. People like, I know David Bonderman, he lives in Aspen, or his family. He's worth about $4.5 billion, I think. And I can go down the list of the others that I know in that category, in that league in Aspen. You know, Adam Lewis. I mean, you know, there's some people that are very motivated potentially if we had the right structure. So anyway, maybe we can give a little thought to that, Keith. You know, you're the senior operator in that area, to where people would be comfortable coming up with, let's say our goal was $1 billion fund for this express intent and purpose. And that we were to target Aspen because there's such a high concentration of high net worth individuals there, that then we lent the comfort, you know, that they would feel that the right people were in control, were doing the right things with the money, essentially. You know, that whole. But I think it's time now, and based on what everything that Sylvia just, you know, outlined and said, I mean, these tipping points are here, as Johan will illustrate so eloquently, and Sylvia as well, you know, and so, you know, this is what Shea is talking about also, you know, everywhere she goes, and
well, I think that destructive activity like deep sea mining, wind farms, salmon aquaculture can attract hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And so when I say, oh, we got $16 million on this expedition to try to combat the problems, we need to flip it. We need to, like, I used to say when I was chief scientist again at NOAA that you ought to take the fisheries budget, which is about $1 billion, to go out and kill things, and give it to the National Marine Sanctuary Program. It had a $50 million program to protect the ocean, little m millions, to exploit the ocean, big B billions. I mean, let's find a way to flip it. You have to think about the urgency of protecting life. Our existence is on the line. Shouldn't that be worth a big investment? And can't we make it pay? Can it make it? Is there not a way to make it worth our while financially to invest in those activities that will safeguard everything we care about.
You know, Aramco is the Saudi Arabian oil company, listed oil company. Its profit this year, 2022, was $161 billion. That's its profit. A profit, $161 billion.
In 22.
Yeah. It's the biggest profit ever made by a company. Now, of course, they'll be making a big profit anyway, as they always do. But all these oil and gas companies are making supernormal profits. Why? Because it's from the war.
Right.
These are wartime profits. They're benefiting from the war. Right. And what they argue now, of course, is that we're underinvesting in oil and gas because the world's now paying for it because there's not enough oil and gas. So their argument is, well, this is just evidence that we haven't invested enough into oil and gas exploration and development.
About the new announcement just came today about Biden approving in the Arctic Reserve, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, I've got to have a look. I just saw that myself. I've got to have a look at that to understand what the hell's happening.
It's politics. He's trying to get reelected. Is what it is.
Yeah.
Lose my vote.
Yeah, but who are you going to vote for? You know, the other guy?
Yeah. It's the problem, isn't it? Because they'll be worse. Yeah.
Well, okay. If that's the lowest common denominator, we have to represent the highest. And then, you know, I mean, the world really is looking for your leadership now, Sylia and Keith both. And it needs it. It needs it really badly. And we need to send the inspiration up the line with Shea, with the youth that'll be attending your summit in Vilar, Keith, here in the next couple of days, I hope. And so, you know, the opportunity is now. You know, I had a long talk with Ted Janulis, who's a wonderful man, who's organizing all the Ocean Week stuff, and, you know, put in a strong word for both of you. I think that you'll end up having a nice session there. I don't need to be involved in it, except for to sit in the audience and hopefully enjoy it. Would like to expand that if possible. We've talked about that. But to think that what's happening here at Ocean Week, what's happening here in the Lofoten's on the Abel Tasman, what's happening here potentially with Protecting Change, with the AREDAY Summit, with Green Week in New York City, ultimately at the end of the year, this is just in 23, over there in Abu Dhabi, and connecting those dots, where the most important day is the day that we all leave these things, and then how do we take that information and carry it forward, in my view, to continue to build this this information pipeline solution. So